emphasize that, and then your kids can take the huge inheritance that you've given them and they can actually grow it. But if you don't pass down that wisdom, your kids are probably going to blow it. How does a young man gain wisdom? By pursuing.
What does the Bible have to say about building generational wealth? I brought ex-pastor Noah Wieler on to discuss the subject in depth.
Elon Musk, he is very future-focused. We've kind of lost this idea of being future-focused in the past 100 years. But his focus is survival versus the cathedrals being built. Both are future-focused. Is survival just it? Or...
My daughter has like this picture book Bible, and it tells a lot of the stories through a child-friendly way. You know, a lot of. I mean, I've not the entire thing, but I've read some of the King James Bible, and it is it is a tough read. So having that children's Bible's been really good. My daughter will just walk off and read it, and I can pretty confidently say at this point she probably knows more of the Bible than I do. I'm a little embarrassed to say that, but I was reading through it with her, and there was this one instance where Abraham goes off and he has a farm and sheep, and in this children's Bible at least it talks about the wealth that he has and how he's a wealthy man, and it doesn't talk about his gold, it doesn't talk about his investments. It's all held within this, within things that are living and things that are, products of God. I mean, everything's a product of God, but these things that are we as human beings have a responsibility to take care of, and we can see this right back, at least I believe so, into the Garden of Eden, where Adam was tasked with taking care or stewarding the garden, and we can. I want to kind of dig into how we can pull some of that wisdom into our lives and how we can become biblically rich in the sense of not only of our spiritually, but materially in a way that's considered ethical.
That's good that you mentioned the distinction between kind of what most people think of as like hard assets, which is like gold, silver, land, even livestock to an extent, and then kind of soft assets of just like skills and wisdom and just like integrity or having a good reputation that you can pass down to your kids. And the Bible talks about both. And if you've been in Christian circles, most people tend to really emphasize the soft assets, especially the like spiritual knowledge and integrity, and that's so good, and that should be our primary emphasis. But if you don't have any of those hard assets, then having a good reputation really doesn't do you any good, right? Like, what good is doing business if you have nothing to trade with people, right? And so you see very early on in the Bible that God kind of puts his name on people, and Abraham's a great example of this. He makes a covenant with Abraham, and then he blesses him with livestock, with the promise of land. Like, land is super emphasized throughout the entire Bible. And I love what you mentioned moments ago of like livestock. It's a living asset, right? Like, gold doesn't grow, right? A brick of gold isn't going to grow over time. Its value might, but the gold itself isn't going to grow. But sheep will, and they'll reproduce, and they'll, like cows, will grow bigger and stronger. I'm probably speaking a little bit out of my butt here, a little bit. I'm not a farmer, so if I say something about cows or sheep, just correct me.
You're all correct so far. Yes, yeah. They do reproduce and they do get bigger. Yes. Carry on.
Yeah. Okay, good. That was close. Yeah. But you do get this emphasis because God is a God of life, that his emphasis is on growing things, and you grow stuff that kind of already has life, right? Like a piece of land is living, and you plant vegetables, crops, flowers on it, and it grows and gives birth to new life. And so those tend to be, especially in the Old Testament, the kind of hard assets that God emphasizes. Is he blesses people. Like Job is a good example of this. When you read the book of Job, God says, here's a righteous man, He's a great dude, kind of one of my best. And he is kind of given a number of like all the land he has, all the crops he has, all the servants he has, and so there is this emphasis on hard assets as a kind of type of blessing, but they're all kind of things that grow. You do get some mention of gold and silver, but most of the emphasis is on land and sheep or chariots or horses, and because those things are kind of what brings life, and God is life, and so obviously it makes sense that the two would come together. So yeah, it was interesting you said the life thing, because I was like, that's an interesting point that I didn't think of until you mentioned it 5 minutes ago. Yeah.
Hey man, you're supposed to be lecturing me here. What's going on?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, it's like what I'm kind of looking at it from. I have 10 acres of land. We have 15, 16 sheep now. And I want to grow this flock over time. I want to make my land more productive. We're planting a food forest. We're doing all sorts here. And when we got this land, it was rocky, dry. It wasn't barren. There was grass, but it wasn't well taken care of. Like the previous owners had three cattle and a couple of pigs, and he just let them. There was no management. The land was just, it was just let be. And around the house, he'd tried to plant things, but they weren't really taken care of. So what I did when I came in was one of the first things I did was start working on a garden, which required me like digging out the ground, taking rocks out, replacing with organic matter. And I gradually built it up over time. And then from that, we had this amazing potato harvest, corn, stuff like that. But then in the process of doing that, when I took the rocks out, I put them underneath these trees, basically like a rocky mulch. And then that created a nice microclimate to help those trees grow. So then the trees would shelter the land and block the wind, especially around our house. But then that let us plant more and more and more. And then the grass has been getting greener, been putting organic matter in the ground. And land is very much a living thing. And the more life that you can put into it and manage it well as well, the better it's going to be. Like if you just let cattle in to just graze it down to nothing, they're going to pick out the best types of grass, and they're going to leave the worst until there's nothing left of the best, and then the best goes extinct. And so now you only have this bad grass left over, and the cattle's not going to grow as fast because it's not the kind of grass they want to eat. Whereas if you're able to divide the paddocks up and move them around, they don't have an opportunity to make those good grasses go extinct. And so you're able to manage it better and improve the land gradually over time. Now, their manure, if left untended, creates these, I don't know if you've ever seen cow manure before, but it's pretty messy.
Yes.
And it leaves these big mounds, right? We call them cow patties in New Zealand. And it leaves these big mounds, and if you leave them unattended, the grass will grow in them, and then you get an uneven surface, and then that hardens and locks in, and then you get like a bumpy paddock. And that's what ours was like when we first moved here. So you either have to harrow, which means drag something across them, or you have to mow it down flat once it's all grown in, which is what I've done. And the two downsides to leaving it like that is A, it's uneven, so it's not very nice to walk on, and B, it's all the nutrients are only getting concentrated in that one spot, so you're not spreading them out. And one of the downsides to having it uneven is that a cow can then roll its ankle. And the point I'm trying to build up to here is that, in the sense of like a forest doesn't need to be managed, right? A forest will grow and take care of itself, but a forest is also limited in how much it can care for us. There's only so much per acre that we can draw from a forest without intentional planning. And so as humans, the land that we do manage, we need to manage it well. And it's like we've been given this task by God and the skills by God to be able to do this. Because if we just left it be, like last guy, this uneven paddock, bad grasses, like I had to go around and reseed clover because there was just nothing left. So that all boils down to what you were saying. We need skills, we need to have integrity to make sure that we steward these things well. And obviously, at some point, we need fiscal resources as well, because running land isn't cheap, and we need to bring in external help. And that might not necessarily be in the form of labor; it could just be in the form of resources. You might need to bring in lime to spread on the paddocks, or you need to bring in somebody to help you with the fencing, because it's not worth buying a big tractor and the fencing equipment. So I think balance is the key word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, balance in the right things, right? And it's interesting you made the distinction between a forest and a garden, because like a forest, the ecosystem of a forest, it like still has life, right? But it is like chaotic and it's dangerous. You wouldn't want your kids to venture into a forest without
Not too
being
far.
well equipped,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Not too far. And yet we see with God, when He creates Adam, He doesn't put him in like the forest of Eden. He puts him in a garden, and so there's already kind of an order to it even before Adam shows up, and yet God tasks him with maintaining it, with working at it, right? Kind of like what you mentioned, right? You got to pick the rocks, you got to cultivate, you got to like water. I don't know what all Adam did for work in the beginning, but there is this idea of like working and keeping, and yet it's kind of balanced with rest, because God creates Adam on day 6, and then the 7th day is a Sabbath day, which means he's not supposed to do any work. So his like first day of work, quote unquote, he has the day off, and so it's kind of a weird thing, because we can kind of get caught up in this idea of, oh, we need to constantly be working, we need to constantly be maintaining, we need to like always be like actively doing it, and yet you can almost you can almost get hyper focused in this, where you're almost like micromanaging things to the point where it actually makes things worse, and yet God tells Adam to work, and yet says, yeah, but I want you to also just enjoy it. Like, just sit in it, rest in it, enjoy the blessings I've given you. There is still a job to do. You still have to work at it, but don't get so... like, there's a big trend right now on the internet, like your hustle culture and like making money and like work 25 hours in a day and until you die. And it's like, that's not good. And it's not good for you, but it's also not good for your work, like your quality of work. You need space and time to rest. And so to build well, to even build an inheritance well, to build a business well, you do need balance, but it needs to be balancing the right things. And so yeah, we're working and keeping it, but keeping things in the proper order, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's funny that you say talk about hustle culture and stuff. I fall victim to that all the time. I will work myself to the bone until I burn out. And it's like a frequent pattern I fall into, man. And it's not good. And I can acknowledge that, but it's like it's hardwired into me in a sense. Not giving myself any excuses. But when you said Adam's first day at work of life was a day off, which is really interesting, because it's like we need that time off. And the thing that came to mind when you said that was shower thoughts. I don't know if anybody else out there has them, but if you're in the shower and it's just like warm water or sometimes cold water, depending on what kind of mood you're in, you're standing there in the shower, and you might just say, I'm just going to take a minute just to before I go back into the fray of life, I'm just going to take a minute. And in that minute, it's like your subconscious has been working on ideas or trying to figure something out or whatever it is, and you'll just have this random thought that comes into your head, and it can be the solution to what it was that you were being frustrated by. Like for me, it's like I get tweet ideas in the shower all the time. I'll be like completely like I'll be sitting looking at a screen like I can't think of a single. Like, you think it'd be easy, but after a certain point in time, you think, man, I can't think of any tweets. And then I'll be in the shower, and be like, oh man, I got to write this down. So that's usually what drives me to get out of the shower. So it's interesting that his first day was a day off, quote unquote, because just because it's off doesn't mean like we don't exist or like we have to shut our minds off. It's a day for us to recover and to center ourselves and to find time to get those ideas. And if maybe you're not religious or you're more secular out there, and you don't necessarily believe in having Sundays off or something like that, it doesn't mean that you can't take time off in order to recover and collect those thoughts, because that could be the driving factor in what it takes to get your family to the position or place that you want them to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think God has specifically engineered us, right? Like, shower thoughts are a great one. Like going for a walk, like to just walk away from situations. It's kind of funny. I'm my day job right now is a carpenter, right? So building stuff, and I work on a crew with other guys, and it's so funny because like you'll get guys that we're building something, right, and they'll get like super locked in, super dialed in, and all of a sudden something will go wrong, and kind of like the masculine nature of things. When things go wrong, you kind of just want to like power through it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so, yeah, definitely. And so you sometimes hear guys on the other end of a site just like hammering something, right? Like just trying to get it to work, right? And then finally they just got fed up with it. They walk away. And the next guy will come over and just like adjust one or two things, and then it works. And you're like, I hate you. Like, I can't believe that worked, right? But it's like, yeah, because you had the space to be kind of outside of the situation a little bit, kind of walked in with fresh eyes, and the solution was pretty obvious. And so it's true for not just building it in the carpentry side of things, but building in anything, right? Like, and your mention of like your best tweets or shower thoughts are kind of that exact same idea, right? Of like, you need to step away, kind of let your mind clear a little bit, focus on something else, and then boom, the solution just kind of comes to you. And I think God has specifically engineered us that way so that we don't think too highly of ourselves, right? It's kind of a self-humbling thing where you're like, how did I not see this before, right? Like, that's kind of embarrassing. But so that we trust in something kind of beyond ourselves, right? And so we focus on what is ultimately important, and that is making sure we're building something that is lasting, right?
Yeah, you know me. I'm all about that, man. That's my MO when it comes to the content I write and what I'm doing with my family. You know, and everything that I do, I think about building something for the long term. And there have been times when I have made terrible errors in judgment, and I have tried to take shortcuts, and I haven't been thinking about how things will last for the long term. And I pay the price. And a good example of this is like in a physical sense, if you buy something that is of lower quality, and you intend to use it for a long time, sometimes you'll get something that you just want to break. You know, it might be like a pin. It's just meant to hold something for a day, whatever. Okay, just go and buy the 1 cent pin. But if you want that pin to like support a door, you're not going to beat the 1 cent pin. It's gonna fall down. So you want to get something that's that's going to last. And I've made this mistake many times. I've never again. Right, I've made this mistake many times in my land, never making it again. I only ever do things 100% the right way, because now what's happening is I am paying the price for the last guy before me and his little shortcuts. And I hats off to the guy. He did a lot in terms of having a full-time job. He put his wife, now ex-wife, unfortunately, through school, and he built this property for his family. And he did a lot, but in order to do that, he had to take a lot of shortcuts, unfortunately. And he's not the one who has to deal with the fallout. So for me, I'm making sure I'm doing everything the right way. So from the water pump that I do to the fencing, we just got pigs, and we got a food forest at the moment that we're building up, and I've got them running in there with an electric netting. I could have gotten the $200 electric netting, but I got the $400 electric netting because I wanted to last, and I want to get something quality. And if you cheap out and get lesser stuff, especially with New Zealand sun, it's going to get destroyed. Like one big mistake I made was I got these tarpaulins to black out the ground in the garden, and they lasted a year, and then we had a windstorm, and the wind frayed them and pulled them apart. And to this day, like 2 years later, I'm still picking up little bits of tarpaulin all over the place. And it drives me nuts because I don't like litter. I don't like plastic. I try to avoid it, unless it's absolutely necessary. And, I cheaped out. Honestly, I cheaped out and I got the tarpaulins, and I should have gotten the black plastic, which is what we have now. And I paid the price, and I'm still paying the price now. So we've got to learn these things. And part of that, looping it all back together, is having the wisdom. And sometimes wisdom comes naturally. Sometimes we learn it in other ways. And this was you that told me this, wisdom in the Bible is seen as more valuable than gold. So do you want to kind of touch on that, or maybe some examples of where we can find that in the Bible?
Yeah, so that I was looking at this. I made a note of that. That's in Proverbs, And Proverbs is, if you've never read Proverbs, I would highly recommend it. It's full of maxims or quotes from, at that point in time, the king of Israel, a guy named Solomon, said to be the wisest man who ever lived. God gifted him with wisdom. It's a whole story throughout the Bible. His dad was King David. God made a covenant with David. And then his son, Solomon, gets the benefits of David's covenant with God. And God appears to Solomon and says, hey, I'll give you anything in the world, right? You're ruling this kingdom. Your father was great. I'll give you anything in the world. And Solomon, who's at this point probably in his mid-30s and has kind of grown up in royalty, kind of been trained in how to be king, has seen family tensions with his other like half-siblings and siblings. And he doesn't say, I want political security. He doesn't say, I want this giant army or I want all this gold. He says, I want wisdom to rule this nation well. And God is like, that's the choice you should make, right? And God blesses him with gold and riches kind of as a bonus for making the right decision. And so Solomon writes in Proverbs that wisdom, above all else, above gold and silver, is kind of the greatest treasure and the treasure worth pursuing the most. He often says in Proverbs, how does a young man gain wisdom? By pursuing wisdom. And so it's like that's kind of it makes sense, but it's a kind of mysterious in the way he's trying to explain it. But Jesus mentions this a little bit. He says, kind of store up your treasures in heaven, where mold and rust, where thieves can't get at it. And wisdom is one of those eternal treasures that we are called to pass on to the next generation, but nobody can steal that for you, right? Like, if you're building a business for your kids to take over, your kids might take it over, but a storm might come, a natural disaster might come, and all of a sudden your business is wiped out, right? And then what do your kids have? Or you store up all this gold, you have all your gold bars, you bury it in your land for the next generation to take over, but then war might break out. And are you going to have that land? Probably not, because another nation is probably going to take over that land. But wisdom, you might forget wisdom, but nobody's going to take that from you. And that's something worth passing down to the next generation. And we see this with this idea of the kind of spoiled, bratty kid who has inherited all of this money from their family, right? We're like, nobody likes those people, right? Because they have all of this abundance, but they don't know what to do with it. And that's where the wisdom component comes into it, is you can leave your kids all of this stuff. You can work your life to provide for your family, to embody this idea of what it means to be a good father and husband, and taking care of your kids and taking care of the next generation. But if you don't pass down that wisdom, your kids are probably going to blow it. And then all of that was for nothing. Or you could pass down wisdom, emphasize that, and then your kids can take the small little bit or the huge inheritance that you've given them, and they can actually grow it and make it bigger, and they can be more generous with it than you ever could be. And so wisdom is kind of the key component of managing, of stewarding everything that God has given us, whether that be physical assets, whether that be immaterial stuff. It is that kind of linchpin that either pushes us over the edge to accomplish greatness, or kind of has us fall off the deep end and have everything kind of be wasted.
That's really well said. And I was itching to have my say, but I really want to hear you, because what's really interesting here is a key part of the philosophy that I teach around dynasty building, and everything falls down to 4 core resources that a family needs. And this is human, intellectual, social, and financial capital or resources. And the human is like your faith, your spirituality, the people in your family. And then the second, like these are in order of importance. The second is intellectual, and obviously wisdom kind of falls into that category. And if you mess up the order of this at all, then you don't have a dynasty. Your family's not going to last. And you see that with people that focus on these physical, material assets, where I've got to have this business, I've got to have all this money put aside, but they don't focus on the human and connection they have, or the wisdom of how to steward that for their family. That's how you get those trust fund kids that just like blow it all, and we feel very annoyed because they have all this abundance, and we could do so much with that, but they're just blowing it, and it's so frustrating. But it's a product of their environment. It's a product of this lack of this path that we're following, and it's very interesting that I don't know if you've heard me say that before, but that all of this kind of boils down to like biblical teaching as well. I haven't really considered it in that regard before, so that's really fascinating, and like. Because if you it's a whole teach your children to fish, your mentality,
Yes.
You teach a man to fish, you feed him you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. But taking a step further, if you teach him or tell him to teach his kids how to fish, then you'll feed him for generations. And I think the Bible really wants us to do that. It's given us minds, we are the only creatures, at least that we know of, that can put off the now for later. And I find that really... that's a responsibility more than it is anything else. It's a blessing, but it's a responsibility as well, and that's a good thing, because it means that we have to take this knowledge of ourselves and of our environment and for our family and build things that last. And we've lost a lot of that, I think, in the last 100 years or so. That we've really taken away from the idea that we are put here to build things for the future. And you can see it in architecture, you can see it in family cultures, you can see it in inheritance, you can see it in the boomers, and can't take it with you. So it's a really sad state, and if we could just bring that back, it is our responsibility and our duty, because we have been given that job and that task and that ability to plan ahead. Otherwise, we'll be thumping each other over the head with clubs still, and dragging people back to caves. So I think we need to sort of bring that back, and the Bible's a really good example of this, and that the wisdom of knowing that we should is part of that package of having that wisdom in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned that we've kind of lost this idea of being like generational focused or future focused in the past 100 years. When you think of grand architecture, when you think of these amazing buildings or cities that you want to visit, most people probably think of like European cathedrals, right? These like mass structures that literally took generations to build. The first guy who started it didn't get to see it completed. And yet, it wasn't just like building something to build something, nor did they have kind of a, like Elon Musk, say what you will about Elon Musk, he is very future focused. Like he is wanting to like explore the universe, and he's recognizing that it's going to take generations to get there. He's very future focused. But his future focus is just survival. Like we should explore Mars because then humanity survives, and we should just explore so that we survive. Versus the cathedrals being built, where it's we want to build something not just for our survival, but we want to build something that takes generations to build, but points to something that even transcends the generations, where we're not just wanting to make sure civilization survives, we're wanting the focus of civilization to be on something that can never die, and that is God himself. And so both are future focused, but there's a very key difference between the two, where one's going, I want to be future focused, let's use every piece of technology we can to make sure people just survive. And the other's going, yeah, but is that all there is? Is survival just it? Or why don't we build something that transcends generations and gives us higher meaning? It gives our life purpose. And in the past 100 years, we've lost all of that. We've lost sight of the transcendent. We've lost sight of being future-focused. We have almost become like animals, where we're just dialed into what immediately satisfies my immediate desires. And we've stopped building for greatness. And we've even stopped having families. And that those are horrible things, because God has made us to have families, but he's made us to be future focused. We're not like animals, we're distinct from animals. And we're given a higher purpose that is focused entirely on God. And all of those kind of flow together. And as soon as you cut off one, you tend to get an iffy territory where things don't work well. Civilization starts to fall apart, families start to fall apart, and everything just kind of gets broken down into this chaos where nobody really knows what to do. Yeah.
A lot to unpack there. I'm just organising my talking points here, so I don't go on too long. But that we become like animals, man. That hit me really hard. Like we have, in a sense, because the whole focusing on survival, it's bleak in a way. It's bleak.
Mm-hmm.
We're just gonna. I mean, there's hope in it, I suppose. But being focused on just living, it's bleak, and you can we can see that. And the fact that people don't, at least in the West, aren't having as big of families, or at least, or even not having families altogether, and viewing it as a negative thing. And then, there's also the fact, we've become very self-focused, and people's idea of the future is the end of their lives, and that's
mm-hmm.
it. That the future to them is okay, I'm going to live to 80. That's my focus. That's the end of the world as far as I'm concerned. That's very not narrow-minded. I mean, it is in a way, but that's not the word I'm looking for. It's very, I guess, short-sighted in the fact that we're not looking. We've kind of got our eyes to the ground. We, the royal we, generally speaking,
mm-hmm.
have our eyes to the ground instead of the eyes of the horizon, which is where they should be. And that, in terms of the cultural zeitgeist, we see that in the emphasis on retirement, and I fall into this trap at a time. I was very focused on never having to work again, and so that became a focus of my life, and I became hyper obsessed with working as much as I can now, putting assets in place so I'd never have to work again. And the funny thing is that I actually got there to a beans and rice level at about 25. And I became so unhappy and so miserable, I kind of messed the whole thing up, because it was self-sabotage, because it was just eating away at my core and making me so unhappy. And now that I work a lot, I enjoy the work that I do, I feel a lot more fulfilled. I obviously work so hard, I've hurt myself out, which isn't good. But it's that focus on retirement, the focus on self, that's really puts us back and detracts from our wisdom, because we're not as interested in passing things on to the next generation, be it physical wealth, or be it wisdom, or be it our reputation. We don't focus on the next generation, we focus on ourselves. And that is very anti-biblical, let's say. I don't want to say satanic, but it is in a way. I'm not the biggest knowledge database of different faiths, but I think there's one called Levian Satanism, and it's the center. It's the self-worship, basically, and it's almost like a sliver of that's been cut off, and that's what a lot of people treat their lives like, Whereas we can really, because we have this knowledge of the future and this knowledge of things that are bigger than us, we can take what we have and what we have accumulated and give it to the next generation. If we didn't do this, like everything's generational. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's physical or knowledge or whatever. Everything's generational. From the technologies that we have, we wouldn't be talking, on opposite sides of the planet right now, different hemispheres. It's spring here, it's autumn there, or fall. Sorry,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have all these different languages. We wouldn't have sailed ships. We'd all just be, grass huts, clubs, caves, whatever. It's everything's generational, and we need to take that and continue to apply it and not become so self-focused. Like looping back to what you were saying about Adam, he might have been given that first day off in the Garden of Eden, but he wasn't put there to retire. He was put there to work and to do something with his life. And that's what we're supposed to do as well. We need to do something with our lives and build something that is not only good for ourselves, but good for the next generation as well. And whilst, he didn't have children until he left the Garden of Eden, likely what he learned, almost like a pseudo-childhood, I suppose, and forgive me, like, again, not the expert here, but it's almost like a pseudo-childhood where he had this sandbox to play in and to learn, and then to go out into the world and apply these things. And from him, the whole world was seeded. So it's such an interesting, I don't know if parable is the right word, but parallel, I suppose is a bit of it, an interesting parallel to our own lives and what we can do, from where we're at now and to what we can accomplish.
Yeah, definitely. We do get this idea of like work is evil. You shouldn't have to work, right? Or you should work only until you have enough, and then you should stop working and you should just enjoy life. And that's very hedonistic. And it's like you said, it's very self-focused, and it is demonic in the sense that it is anti what God has said is good. And that's kind of a very broad definition of what is demonic, but it's kind of the best one, because the first thing God does give Adam is a job. It is to work. So work isn't evil. It's not bad. God told Adam to do that before sin even entered the world. It was to work. But then he also said, like, reproduce, have a family, have kids, right? Like, multiply. And so that's also really good. After Adam and Eve sinned, both of those things become harder. Yeah, the ground is cursed. There's now more pain in childbearing. They become difficult, but the blessings of those things don't go away. It is like you've probably experienced this, but there's actually something really enjoyable about a hard day's work, whether that be outside doing carpentry or like inside, whatever, like coming home and feeling exhausted and just being like, oh, I worked hard today, right? Like there's something really good about that versus those days where you kind of have nothing to do. Maybe it's halfway through the holiday season and you're just kind of bored and you're like, this isn't good. Like, I don't feel good. I feel useless. I feel purposeless. I probably feel gross because I ate too much turkey, right? But God desires to give us good things. But he always puts it under stewardship, and stewardship is tied very closely to responsibility. And so work and family, these things that God has declared to be good, he desires us to work, to be productive, to grow things, desires us to have families, to grow our families. They come with a lot of responsibilities, and when we neglect those responsibilities, when we go, I don't want any responsibility, I just want to live my life, I just want to freely do, right? Like, a guy who neglects his responsibilities, nobody's going, that's the guy I want to aspire to be. Yeah. And because we intuitively know that it's not good, because that's not what God has made us for.
without responsibility and without purpose, we get into this negative spiral. And that's what I found with the retirement thing when I tried my pseudo retirement. Now I didn't have a purpose, and for me, like work and building things became that purpose. So the way I got myself out of it was I started up a business, and it's the same with our families. We find purpose through our family or through what we want to provide. And it's interesting that you said gave that definition of demonic, which I find quite interesting. Like I've heard it said, and I might again be entirely wrong, but Satanism isn't necessarily evil; it's the inversion of that which is holy. And I think that's really interesting because that's what can kind of tempt us into these bad things. And you said, when sin was introduced to Adam and Eve's lives, things became harder. That's exactly true for our lives as well. The more things that we do that are sinful, the harder our lives get. They might not be in the moment. I'm sure that fruit was delicious, right? But but think about the fallout from that, So it was not a good decision ultimately. And it's just like, it might be easier to be slothful and not work on, if you have land, work on something, or it might be easier to not paint that wall in your house. But ultimately, it's going to lead to more damage, which creates either more work later, or you have to live in these terrible conditions.
It goes to show that things cannot be built to last if they're not built on a good foundation, right? And truth is always the best foundation, right? And I don't know if you're a Jordan Peterson fan. I've listened to some of his stuff. There's a lot I agree with him. There's some I disagree with him on. But he wrote in his, I think it's in his first book, this idea of always tell the truth because it'll always end up being the best result, right? Because the more kind of we lie, we try to manipulate things, eventually things just shatter, right? Things can only be twisted for so long before they break. And so he kind of emphasizes this, like, tell the truth, have that be your foundation, because then you can build on something that is solid, even if in the moment it sucks, right? Like, nobody wants to admit they screwed up, right? It's so much easier to lie. But the building your foundation on the truth is like building your foundation on God, right? The two are very closely linked. Where it's something that's going to last, right? The truth is going to last. You don't have to worry about it. It's somebody manipulating it or being found out. You just go, I told the truth. We can move forward from now, and we can continue in this process.
Well, I had to look this up because, again, not the most well read, but Jesus did say that I am the way and the truth and the life, and I think that
Yes.
the very fact that the word truth was highlighted there was very telling. It's about us being honest, not only in our dealings, but our actions and our faith as well. And part of the reason why I don't often talk about my faith in the Bible is because I want to be honest in my dealings, and I'm not the most well-read person. I'm not the most pious man in the world. I came from atheism. I came from 27-ish years of atheism, basically, to faith. And it's an ongoing process. And I think anybody that believes that they have it all figured out is probably the person who has at least figured out, perhaps. So it's been an interesting journey to come through that. And on the subject of truth and how it pertains to our family, I have always taken the stance that you need to be honest with your kids, and that's all boiling down to the fact that we're trying to build this foundation, and we're trying to not only teach them to be honest, which is also very important, but if we base our relationship on lies, it's a rocky foundation. It's not something that we can really build anything solid on. And I think that's true for our relationships with our wives or spouses. It's true for our relationship with our friends. It's true for the reputations that we build, be it on social media or in business, whatever it is. We need to be honest. And people can, if they can't see through your lies now, they're eventually going to see through them, and it's going to come back and bite you. Would you want to be friends with a liar, someone who lied to you all the time? No. So why do it to your kids? Base everything on truth and be honest with them, and with the interactions that you have with them. Just be honest. And I found that to be a really good policy with my kids. And it also lets me say, have I ever lied to you? And I can get an honest answer out of them where they say,
Yeah.
no, you haven't. And I wouldn't want it any other way. And not only does it apply to us with our kids, but it should apply to us in all dealings as well. And we've been taught biblically, or even just purely morally or ethically from a secular standpoint, that honesty is the best policy.
So I'm in Saskatchewan, Canada, right? And everybody in Saskatchewan is either a farmer or around farmers all the time. And you, being a farmer, maybe I'll poke fun at you a little bit here. But we kind of joke, farmers complain because if they didn't complain, they'd have nothing to talk about. So it's like, either you're complaining it's you didn't get enough rain, or you're complaining you got too much rain, or you're complaining it's too hot outside, or you're complaining it's not hot enough, right? And so you're like, farmers are always complaining, but it's this idea of if you're farming, you can do all the right things. You can put all the herbicides and pesticides on. You can take out all of your weeds. You can do all this. I'm mostly talking about agricultural farming at this point. But at the end of the day, you can't make the seed grow. Only God can make the seed grow. You can do all the right things, but if God doesn't go, that seed is growing, it's not growing. And so it's like it's God who gives us life. And so yeah, I'm glad you brought up that passage in John where it talks about Jesus being the way, the truth, and the life, where he's the truth we can stand on for foundation. He's the way that gives us wisdom moving forward, but he also desires that we have life. And not just life as in the survival sense, but life that is good, right? Like it's very interesting in the garden, to bring things back to Adam in the garden, is God gives Adam everything he could have needed in the garden before Adam did anything, because God is generous. He desires to give us good things. Genesis 2 talks about how in the Garden of Eden there was gold and silver and jewels and everything, all of us, right, when we think about retirement, right, that we would want, right? Money and a paradise to live in and a hot wife, right? Like that's the dream, right? And God gave Adam all of those. And yet God said, you know what, you still need something to do though. Like you can't just do nothing. And so, yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, it all boils down to, wealth isn't necessarily the ability to do nothing, it's the opportunity to do anything. And and we on this earth have been given this ability to pursue not whatever we want. I don't think that's a fair thing, but we're given these excellent minds to be able to pursue so much more than just mere survival. And tying it all back together, focusing purely on survival, I mean, obviously it's a good thing for the human race to survive, but it's also quite bleak. We're given these minds that are able to look further than beyond, at our own feet, and we can look at the horizon and what it is that we want to build. And most people in retirement wind up dying sooner if they don't do something during that period. So, and there's a reason for that. We are design engineered, whatever you want to call it, for a reason. And we are meant to do something meaningful with our lives. And that doesn't necessarily mean we have to be building rocket ships to go to Mars, but it does mean that we have to do something that's relative to us. And as soon as we stop doing that, that's when we start to decay and things start to go downhill. So in a biblical sense, do you see any wisdom there?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, we're, like you said, you see this in retirement homes, right? Like people who have everything provided for them. Nobody looks at them and goes, yeah, that's a full life, right? Like that's like, it's like, that's fine. But this idea of having purpose, it kind of goes back to being generous, right? God gives us an abundance of things, whether that be physical assets, whether that be like money and Bitcoin and gold and land or all those. He gives us an abundance of things, not so we can say we have an abundance of things and God has blessed us and hoard them all. There's a parable in the Gospels that Jesus says. He talks about this rich man who has all this abundance of crops, and the rich man kind of looks at himself and goes, "What should I do with all my riches?" "Well, I'll build bigger barns to store all my riches in." And so he builds these massive barns to put all his riches in, and then he goes to sleep. And it says, "And the Lord appeared to him and says, 'This night you will be given an account for your life.'" And it's a parable basically talking about, like, don't have riches just for riches' sake, but rather use them as a means to provide value either through business or through generosity. And business kind of is a type of generosity, especially if you're in a service business, right? You kind of have to give up your time and energy and effort in others, and for your business to do well, you often have to, like, give quite a bit, but also as a means to be charitable of your time and energy, of your assets, to take care of people who maybe have less than you, not in this, like, communal, everything belongs to everybody, communist type thing, but in this idea of, like, God has given you things to gift to people because God has been generous to us. He's given us life. He's given us skills and abilities, and we're to reflect that. And so, like, all of those kind of blend together in us reflecting who God is, His generosity, His truth, His all that in not just surviving, but in living life that others look at and go, "That's the life I want."
We just accomplished so much more together as a whole, and when and that's true for you and I talking, and it's true for us as a community. You know, no man truly is an island, and the whole lone wolf thing is just so overblown. Like, a lone wolf dies alone on the prairie. And we as men should be coming together to be able to accomplish more. And that's the reason why I wanted to bring you on today. We've had a great conversation. I've really enjoyed a lot of the topics that we're diving into. I've got a whole list of notes here. We could go on for another hour. But like I said, I'm on a timer with my camera here. Yes. So we'll have to get together and do this again sometime. There's a lot to dive into and a lot to unpack. But, man, you've taught me so much today. So I'm just so grateful for you taking the time today to educate me and educate anybody who's taken the time to listen as well.
Thanks for having me on. This was great. I've enjoyed our conversations, not just this one, but even our previous conversation have been really good, and it's been really cool to talk to somebody who is so, like, future focused, and you've changed. Talking to you and reading a lot of your stuff on X has, like, it's changed the way I think about things. Changed the way I buy things, which is interesting. And so I've been really encouraged by that. So thank you for having me on.
That's very kind of you to say so. I appreciate you taking the time today, Noah. We're going to do this again. The Bible is a topic you could talk about 24/7. Not you specifically, but anybody could talk about 24/7 and just constantly uncover new things. Like, every time I read one of your posts, it gets me thinking about things in a new angle that I oftentimes didn't think of before. So it's like reading a shower thought just about. But very inspirational. So it's always good to explore these topics with you, Noah, and I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah, me too.